Welcome to the Calvary Road with Pastor Sam Allen.
We need God's wisdom, and His wisdom is in His Word, not in the ideas, the concepts, the opinions of men, which are ever changing. Culture changes because people change, but God's the same yesterday, today, and forever. His Word is the same yesterday, today, and forever. People can say they don't believe it, but they can't change what it's saying.
Only with Jesus, only with you.
Today on our walk down the Calvary Road, we'll continue our overview of the Bible. As we finish our study of Ecclesiastes, we'll consider the mortality of humanity and the joy of walking with God, both now and forever.
Solomon, like Job, is getting this. I know my Redeemer lives, and in the last day he will stand upon the earth. And after the worms destroy my body, he says, in my flesh I will see God. And with my eyes I will behold him and not another. In chapter 4, Solomon ponders life from a humanistic perspective, dwelling on the injustice of the powerful oppressing the weak and meek. And he complains, just as Job did back in his book, that he has no advocate, no comforter. And by the way, we have Jesus as our advocate, praying even now at the right hand of the Father for us, interceding on our behalf. And beyond that, we have the Holy Spirit to comfort us and to teach us and to convict us and to console us. And to do all Jesus did for those first disciples, we have the Holy Spirit living within us to do those very things. In chapter 4, verses 8 through 12, he cites the foolishness of the one who labors alone, never asking why and for whom. Look at it, verse 8, chapter 4, there is one alone without companion. He has neither son nor brother, yet there is no end to all his labors. Nor is his eye satisfied with riches, but he never asks, for whom do I toil and deprive myself of good? This is also vanity and a grave misfortune. The cure again is relational. Whenever he shares, I'm doing all this, but for what? For who? Why? Look at verse 9. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their labor. If they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Again, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, 2 can withstand him, and a 3-fold cord is not quickly broken. This is one of those sections, it's age-abiding principle. I think I got that phrase from G. Campbell Morgan, but you find them throughout. 2 are better than 1. It's certainly reality in marriage because, you cannot marry yourself, at least not yet. And so they'll figure it out at some point. But at this point, regardless of what culture says, God made woman from man and for man. He brought Eve to Adam, and Adam said, wow, this is it. She's perfect, Lord. And he's like, hey, second try, you always do better. And so anyway, the point I'm making is this, that in marriage, we find a fulfillment that we can't find anywhere else. Now, if you're single, don't despair. You want to enjoy your single days as much as you can. Why? Because you have unique opportunities as a single person that you don't have as a married person. And if you're married, don't think, the good old days when we were single. No, it's not like that. It's great to be single. It's great to be married if you're walking with the Lord. Either of those states, apart from walking with the Lord, well, there's just so many temptations and trials and troubles in a single person's life. And those are only multiplied once you're married. It's not like, well, once I'm married, everything will go smooth. Could anybody say, I've been married for 30 years and it's all been smooth? Yeah, I didn't think any of you would want to lie in here. So, no, marriage is hard. But it's also the most blessed relationship ever. In it, it's the one relationship where I have opportunity to do something Jesus tells me I need to do constantly. Deny myself, take up my cross, and follow him. love my wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. And do you know that Jesus, the role model for how a husband's to treat his wife, and also the role model for how a wife is to submit to her husband, because he submitted to the Father in all things, but not just that. He submitted even to Joseph, who raised him, and Mary, his mother. He was submitted to the religious authorities, except when they crossed the line and began to violate the law of God. Jesus was submitted. And he's saying, just like that, be submitted in your marriage. And so it's not just in marriage, it's in ministry. We see Jesus sent them out 2 by 2. You could multiply reasons for that so easily, but he gives you some of them. Hey, one falls, the other will be able to help him up. Freezing cold, you can get close and stay warm. Overpowered by one, the two of you will be able to hold it together. And a threefold cord is not quickly broken. Let me say that's true in business too. You partner with somebody that knows the Lord, that sets his heart to do right, you're going to do much better in your business. And a threefold cord, that third part of the cord, you know, as you're weaving like this, I don't know how weaving happens, but however that would be happening, Jesus is that third cord, you see. He's that third part. And when he is woven into a marriage relationship or the ministry you're engaged in or the business you're involved in, when Jesus is in that whole thing, it's going to go much better. Well, in chapters 5 and 6, Solomon counsels all who gather in the house of the Lord to come to hear and not to offer the sacrifice of fools. Why? We need God's wisdom, and his wisdom is in his word, not in the ideas, the concepts, the opinions of men, which are ever changing. Culture changes because people change, but God's the same yesterday, today, and forever. His word is the same yesterday, today, and forever. People can say they don't believe it, but they can't change what it's saying. It's saying what it seems to be saying. In verses 4 and 5 of chapter 5, we see that God doesn't require vows, but once vows are made, they must be kept. And Jesus just basically says, look, you don't need to swear by heaven or swear by the earth. Just let your yes be yes and your no be no, for whatever is more than these is sin. Don't be rash in what you say. And by the way, when you got married, if you're married, or when you get married, if you're going to be married, we call them wedding vows. Now, you don't have to make them unless you're going to get married. And if you're getting married, you should make them. And if you make them, you should keep them. I think all of us would do good if we could get a hold of them, if you have a copy of them, to take your wedding vows and to blow them up and to make something that you see every single day and put it in a prominent place in the house so that you're looking at it and saying, I promised to do this, and I promised to do this, and I did it in the presence of God and all those witnesses. Or in my case, in front of the justice of the peace and someone with the rubber stamp. But nevertheless, I promised to live with and for and love Pam the rest of my life. We weren't even Christians, and I had enough sense to say that. Well, the point is, once you make a vow, God holds you to it. So if you've given your life to him and you call him Lord, he poses this question: why do you say, Lord, Lord, and not do what I say? Yeah, it's a good question. And since it's his, we should ponder it and consider what he's saying. Well, listen, in chapter 5, because we have to jump ahead once again, verses 10 through 12, he says, he who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. Well, this is also vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. So what profit have the owners except to see them with their eyes? The sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of the rich will not permit him to sleep. Now remember, he's the richest man who ever lives, so he knows what he's talking about. Sleepless nights. But the key for us is whoever loves silver will not be satisfied with silver. You can take that word silver and substitute anything you love, and it's saying you will never be satisfied with that. You will never get enough of that unless It's the Lord and people, because that's the great commandment, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, your mind and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you love people, well, you can never outlove God. He loves them more. You love your kids, he loves them more. Whatever we love, though, he says, if it's a what, an it instead of a who, we'll never be satisfied with it. It will never bring satisfaction. He laments all who trust in riches only to see them vanish, unable to accept his loss. In verse 17, all the days, he says, he eats in darkness, and he has much sorrow and sickness and anger. That would describe multitudes of people today. Look at chapter 5, verse 18. Here's what I've seen, he says. It's good and fitting for one to eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor in which he toils under the sun all the days of his life which God gives him. For it is his heritage. As for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth and given power to eat it and receive his heritage and rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God. For he will not dwell unduly on the days of his life because God keeps him busy with the joy of his heart. Remember, Solomon asked for wisdom and God made him rich. Solomon didn't work to be rich. God made him rich. But he's saying the one to whom God has given riches should be able to enjoy his life. And God will keep him busy with the joy of his heart. Again, in chapter 6, he's still on riches. He says they cannot bring satisfaction. Not even family can do that if we fail to appreciate they're a gift from God, and then if we fail to be a blessing to them. All our labor and hope and expectations, he ends up saying, lead in the end to frustration unless we labor for and hope in the Lord. Chapter 7, take a look ahead. In the first 10 verses, he uses the word better 6 times. And he says some things that are a bit of a paradox. We don't have time to go into many of them in any detail, but he says a good name is better than precious ointment. Precious ointment here would be valuable, like that thing that Mary broke and put it over the head of Jesus and the feet of Jesus. It was worth a year's wages. So he's talking about something valuable and beautiful and precious and saved for special occasions. He's saying a good name, a good reputation, that's what your name is, right? A good character. It's more important. It's more precious. It's better. First of the 6 times. He says, better is the day of death than the day of birth. That seems like a paradox because in their mind, well, death ends it all. And I just want to say the day of death is not better than the day of birth, especially if you die without Christ, because you go into a Christless eternity where you're conscious and aware, and you will know. And those people we work with and bump elbows with and interact with, they'll know it didn't have to be this way. That's the greatest torment of hell, is knowing I didn't have to end up here. I could have given my life to the one who gave his life for me. But the idea that the day of death, why would he even say that? Because he's saying you enter into life and it's filled with trials and tribulations and persecutions and injustice and oppression and failure and frustration. But death, well, at least you can rest. But see, there's, again, a partial knowledge he's not really considering because he doesn't have all insight and all understanding. We know more than Solomon because we have not only his writings, we have the entire Scripture. Doesn't make us wiser than him, because wisdom isn't just having more knowledge, it's knowing what to do with it. And he did pretty good for a season. We'll see where he didn't do so well in a moment. Well, he also goes on to say, the house of mourning is better than the house of feasting. He's saying a funeral's better than a party. How could that be? Because at the funeral, you consider your own mortality. You realize life's short. And I want to live it to the fullest and to glorify my Lord. But at the party, well, it's just a party. And then he says, sorrow is better than laughter for the same reason. Rebuke is better than the song of fools. The end is better than the beginning. I know some of you are thinking, well, the end of this sermon will be better, that's for sure. But patience is better than pride. Patience is better than pride. In verses 11 through 29, he says, God's wisdom is good. It's profitable. It's a shield. It's life. Without it, life's injustices and inequities, I was right the first time, they will stumble us. And he says, the just perish and the wicked prosper, and everyone sins, and temptation abounds, and sin leads to suffering. And then he shares a bit of despair that's related to a specific sin in his life. He says in verse 28, the latter part, take a look at it, chapter 7. He says, my soul still seeks, but I cannot find. One man among 1,000 I found, but a woman among all these I have not found. Truly this only I have found, that God made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes. What he's saying is, I look for just one person that really is committed to me. And he goes, I find one guy out of 1,000, and I don't find any women. Well, listen, can I suggest the problem might have been the harem? Because if you have 700 wives and 300 concubines, that's his total, you see. We're talking a serious hoarder. And he has this harem, and he's looking at his 1,000 women. He's saying, not one of them is fully dedicated to me. And I'm thinking, dude, did you not read Genesis? One man, one woman for life. You want a woman to dedicate her life to you? Dedicate your life to her first. This is an area where the wisest guy who ever lived is a complete idiot. Because if he didn't figure it out after wife 300 or 500, well, submission to authority in chapter 8, the certainty of judgment in chapter 9, and chapter 9:11, surprises abound. He says, because the sentence, 8:11, I got to give you this first. The sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily. Therefore, the hearts of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. It's a reminder that God judges because he loves us and to prove we're his, and we should never despise the chastening of the Lord. In chapter 9, after he tells us death and judgment are certain, so live life to the fullest, look at verses 7 through 10. We're almost to the end of all this, believe it or not. Go eat your bread with joy. Drink your wine with a merry heart. For God has already accepted your work. Sounds like he's back to normal here, right? Let your garments always be white. Let your head lack no oil. Live joyfully with the wife you love all the days of your vain life. He sort of slips here and there. Which he's given you under the sun all your days of vanity. For that is your portion in life, and the labor which you perform under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are going. Now that's a bit of a downer, but it's not all true. No, listen, it's true until the end. There's still good after the grave, because to live is Christ and to die is gain. But he never read the New Testament because he was living in the Old Testament times. Chapters 10 and 11 contrast the wise man and the fool. And basically he says this, he goes, your heart, your walk, your words, your works will declare to everyone around you if you're wise or if you're a fool. You set your heart on the things of the world, you are going to waste your life. You set your heart on the Lord, he is going to direct and bless you in every way possible. Chapter 11, verses 9 and 10, exhort the young to rejoice in your youth, but remember, you will stand in judgment. Look at it, 11, 9, and 10. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth. Let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes, but know that for all these God will bring you into judgment. Therefore, remove sorrow from your hearts. Put away evil from your flesh. For childhood and youth are vanity. He says, hey, that word vanity, another word for it is breath or wind. It's like it passes so quickly. Those of you raising little children, they're born and you can hold them in a hand, and then it's an arm, and then it's two, and then they're like knocking you down. And it's like, and it happens so quickly. Well, chapter 12, and we'll conclude with it, and I'll read it with you and to you because, well, it's the climax of his writing and incredible insight. He says, remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come, and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. Get this. If you're young, he's speaking to you. If you're old, he's speaking of you. And that's what develops. He says in verse 2, while the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are not darkened, the clouds do not return after the rain. He begins to describe growing old in very poetic language, but don't miss the symbolism because it's clear. In the day when the keepers of the house tremble, it's talking about when the legs start to get shaky, not just on a ladder, but just in line, right? Oh my gosh, how long is it going to take to get through this? So the keepers of the house tremble. The strong men bow down. The back begins to bow. When the grinders cease because they are few, your teeth start falling out. And then he says that those who look through the window grow dim. This is actually some good news. This is when your eyesight starts to go. How is that good news? Well, when your teeth are falling out and you're all bent over and shaky and you look in the mirror and it's like, well, I don't look that bad. No, you look okay to you because that soft focus is changing everything. When the doors are shut in the street and the sound of grinding is low. This is saying when your hearing starts to go. And again, it's a blessing and a curse. It's a mixed blessing. Why? Because when your hearing starts to go, well, people, they are seeing you for what you really are. They're like, whoa, did you see him? Have you seen her? Look at that, shaky and bowed over and their teeth fell out and they can't hardly see. But here's the good news. You won't hear them talking about you because your hearing's going. And then he says, when one rises at the sound of a bird, and some of you who are older will get this, though you can't hear the TV, and you know who you are, because it's like, could you turn that up? Someone comes over and they're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Because it's like, oh, when you can't hear that, but a bird outside your window wakes you up. That happens. All the daughters of music are brought low. They are afraid of height. I want to say this is not a problem for me in my older years. I've always been afraid of height. Of terrors in the way, when the almond tree blossoms. Yeah, white hair. The grasshopper is a burden. Desire fails, for man goes to his eternal home, and the mourners go about in the street. So remember your Creator. Listen how he describes death. Before the silver cord is loosed, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the well. How do we know he's describing death? He says, then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Vanity of vanity, says the preacher, all is vanity. And moreover, because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. Yes, he pondered and sought out and set in order many proverbs. The preacher sought to find acceptable words, and what was written was upright words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, the words of the scholars like well-driven nails, given by one shepherd. Further, my son, be admonished by these, of making many books there is no end, and much study is wearisome to the flesh. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. He's saying, here's the bottom line of all of this. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil.
After trying everything there was to try, Solomon had decided what was most important in life was your standing before God. We must each choose to live a life with Jesus as our Lord, or an empty life with our own desires as Lord. Nothing is as unfulfilling as serving ourselves. We're so glad you could join us today on the Calvary Road. Join us next week when we'll begin our overview of the Song of Solomon. It's a song with several parts, almost like an opera or musical, and in it, Solomon celebrates the love between a husband and wife. The Calvary Road is a ministry of Calvary Chapel Chico. You can visit our website, ccchico.com, or download the CC Chico app to connect with us and find more from Pastor Sam. You can also listen to the Calvary Road podcast by visiting thecalvaryroad.com. We hope to hear from you soon, and until next time, may God bless your walk down the Calvary Road.
And your grace